The Labour infighting has already started. It comes as Darren Jones MP says the government will have to set out how it will pay for policies at a budget, particularly on this VAT cut. Well, let's speak to our national reporter, Will Godley, who's in Downing Street for us. Will, because this, of course, is the first bit of infighting we've seen, and it's not even been 24 hours since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister, and this is all over digital ID.
Well, absolutely. Good morning to you both. Darren Jones, of course, many saw as Keir Starmer's most loyal ally. He was sacked by Andy Burnham yesterday, and he's taken to X today, urging Andy Burnham to outline how he's going to fund these policies. Of course, Andy Burnham, being a new Prime Minister, wants to introduce some new policies to help him get his agenda for Britain. And this new policy announced this morning is announcing a tax cut to energy bills, taking VAT on electricity bills from 5% to 0. That's implemented from the 1st of October, and it's thought it will save families around £45. But this will cost over the year £850 million. And the government had said they will pay for it through scrapping this digital ID scheme. Now, that was going to cost £1.8 billion over 3 years, so they were going to take some of that money to pay for this tax cut.
Inside Downing Street, Andy Burnham promised a grand economic reset, a breath of fresh air, and an immediate ease to the cost of living crisis gripping British homes. Yet, in less than 24 hours, the shiny apparatus of his brand new administration is already showing its first significant cracks. Welcome to Britain Underneath, where we look far beneath the polished political rhetoric to reveal what is truly happening in Westminster. If you value sharp, uncompromising analysis of United Kingdom politics, hit that subscribe button now and join our growing community, because it genuinely helps this channel stay independent and bring you the unvarnished reality every single week. Now, let us dive straight into the growing storm inside Labour headquarters.
But Darren Jones taking to Twitter, or X as it's now called, has said good news that VAT will be cut on electricity bills. It's a simple way for families to save a few quid and mechanically helps to keep inflation that little bit lower. But he went on to say the digital ID programme was unfunded, and so he said the government will have to set out how it will pay for its new policies at the budget. So, is that something Andy Burnham wasn't aware of? Did he not realise that this digital ID scheme wasn't funded? Is he learning for the first time now by reading Darren Jones's X posts? Or is this something that is just another unfunded policy? And will the new Chancellor, John Healey, have to find some more money to pay for this?
Will Godley there for us outside Downing Street. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, now we're joined by Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. Cartledge. We do appreciate it. Now, look, let's start with your response to this VAT cut today, because, of course, it's already causing controversy, not just, of course, as to where the money's coming from, but within Labour itself. Darren Jones, a former cabinet member, now basically throwing the gauntlet down to Andy Burnham to say, how on earth are you going to pay for this?
Well, look, I think you've absolutely nailed it here. This is an absolutely critical question. You know, you will know from your viewers, as I know from my constituents, that the cost of living is a massive issue today. And so, of course, you know, we've had this new policy, cutting VAT on electricity bills. You'd think that's a very positive measure. I'm sure the public, on hearing that, would think, wow, a great start from Andy Burnham. And it has unravelled within minutes. It's not just Darren Jones, though it's critical to stress, of course, he was a senior Labour minister, and he has come out and said this policy is unfunded. If you look at a document produced by the OBR in November 2025, I doubt many people will have read it, but it's the Economic and Fiscal Outlook, very detailed document. In there, it very specifically states no specific savings have been found to fund the policy. In other words, by saying they're going to use digital ID to fund energy cuts, this tax cut on energy bills, they're using a policy that itself was unfunded, and very explicitly so. So this is, I think this is extremely concerning. You've got a new Prime Minister who stood on the steps of Downing Street promising a new economic model, and his first policy has unravelled within minutes.
The new Prime Minister marched onto the steps of Number 10 with a flurry of headline-grabbing promises, chief among them a complete abolition of the 5% value-added tax on domestic electricity bills starting this October. On paper, it sounds like an unquestionable triumph for struggling households, offering a modest £45 saving over the year. To pay for this £850 million intervention, Mr. Burnham announced he would simply scrap the controversial National Digital Identification Programme. It seemed like a clean, clever manoeuvre. Eliminate a bureaucratic surveillance scheme costing nearly £2 billion and hand the savings right back to the taxpayer. However, the political romance unravelled almost instantaneously. Before the ink was even dry on the official press releases, former Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, took to social media to drop a quiet bombshell. The digital ID scheme, Mr. Jones publicly revealed, was never actually funded in the first place.
What's your reaction to this statement that we've had from the MOD, which has revealed that a Russian warship, which was being shadowed by a Royal Navy vessel, carried out a live-fire artillery exercise just 40 nautical miles south of Plymouth on Monday? This is a reminder, isn't it? Another example of the increased Russian naval activity that we've seen near UK waters in recent months. How do we and how should we be responding to this?
Well, I think it's very concerning. Now, Shadow Defence Secretary, I have not yet had a briefing from inside the MOD about the detail of this, so I can only go by the reports that you're seeing. But I think we all know that we've seen a lot of worrying activity from the Russian military, both at sea and in the air around the UK, and we have to respond strongly. What I would like to see is a government now gripping defence. We've got a new Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, a new Chancellor, John Healey, who was Defence Secretary. They know how serious the threat is. Certainly John Healey does. And I want to see them stepping forward. So I'll give you an example of something we've said as the opposition. Your viewers will know how strongly we feel about the Chagos deal that the government negotiated. We think it's done and dusted, but the key thing is there were hundreds of millions of pounds that were going to be given to Mauritius in this Parliament, which at the moment the government are still budgeting to do that. We think, given the deal is dead, they should transfer that cash to spending on the Royal Navy and accelerating the build of the 13 brilliant frigates we ordered in government. They're being manufactured in Scotland right now. They could be brought into service quicker. That isn't free because you have to pay basically for double shifts working around the clock. We're prepared to do that using the Chagos money, and that would mean more ships into service because the key weakness we have here is not enough surface ships against the Russian threat. So we need to send them that message from the heart of government that we're going to stand up to Putin, and I can tell you, if the Prime Minister does that, he will have our support in the national interest.
It was a ghost item on the balance sheet, a prospective project with zero cash reserves sitting in the Treasury vault. In short, the Prime Minister has cancelled a theoretical expense to fund a very real, very costly tax cut. The arithmetic simply does not add up, exposing a fundamental mathematical flaw at the heart of the government's flagship policy. Take a breath, because this issue goes far beyond a mere accounting error. This sudden friction reveals a deep, festering divide within the governing party itself. Darren Jones was promptly sacked during Mr. Burnham's immediate cabinet clearing, yet his public challenge signals that former ministers are not going to sit quietly while new economic promises are built on quicksand. When senior figures within your own movement begin pointing out that your emergency financial relief relies on phantom money, the opposition hardly needs to raise a finger. The Office for Budget Responsibility has already noted that no specific savings were earmarked for that ID initiative. Chancellor John Healey now faces an immediate crisis ahead of his upcoming budget, tasked with finding nearly £1 billion to fill a hole created on day 2 of the administration.
Mr. Cartledge, let's get your response to a general election. We've seen a poll done by the broadcasting press. Of course, the Daily Mail said that 47% of the population want a general election, only 31% did not. We've got Andy Burnham saying he wants to transform the economy. He's even mooting things like a new top rate of tax at 50p. So at what point did the Conservative Party call for a general election. If this were Labour, they'd say you've got a Prime Minister coming in without a mandate. He wasn't even an MP 5 weeks ago. Surely now is the time for the country to go to the polls.
Entirely fair.
If you are enjoying this deep dive into the inner workings of Westminster, please make sure to subscribe to Britain Underneath right now. Taking a second to subscribe helps us stay informed, keeps this platform alive, and ensures you never miss our daily breakdowns of political power plays. While Westminster remains locked in domestic squabbles over energy tax mechanics, a far darker shadow is looming just off the British coastline. The Ministry of Defence confirmed that a Russian warship recently conducted live-fire artillery exercises merely 40 nautical miles south of Plymouth, shadowed by a Royal Navy vessel. It is a chilling reminder of the severe external threats facing the realm, while politicians fight over fiscal technicalities. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge has already challenged the administration to stop sending hundreds of millions overseas and instead divert those funds directly into the Royal Navy to accelerate the construction of critical surface frigates.
With global security deteriorating and domestic budgets unravelling, public patience is wearing thin, with recent polling suggesting nearly half the country is already demanding a fresh general election to settle the national direction. The political honeymoon in Westminster has not just ended, it barely survived the morning news cycle. We are witnessing a government attempting to balance massive economic promises against severe fiscal realities, all under the watchful gaze of a fractured party and a tense international backdrop.
Make sure you stay informed by subscribing to Britain Underneath today. It takes just one click, but it supports our work immensely and guarantees you will always be the first to know what is really happening behind closed doors in British politics. Stick around, watch our previous videos to get the full picture, and I will see you in the next investigation.